Most important is that the EU will talk with one voice, but also a voice that has to say something. The problem now is that we've got 28 ministers of foreign affairs coming to a position and they all have 28 vetoes. So usually if the EU gets to an agreement, it's a rather vague, very general language that comes out of Brussels. That's the problem. To really gain clout internationally, we have to speak with one voice, but we also have to give up the 28 vetoes, because then the EU can really speak strongly with one voice. Of course, that means we also need democratic legitimacy, so democratic control, and there of course the European Parliament should have a bigger say in what the EU is going to say in foreign affairs. Then also important internationally, if you think of the Security Council of the United Nations, very clearly for the Greens that means the EU should be in the Security Council and not Great Britain, France, and therefore having different voices of the EU. It should be the EU as one voice.
First of all, we have further developed our external service and the foreign policy which we have now newly done with the Treaty of Lisbon, and the implementation is by far not good enough. Here we have to go forward despite all the progress we have. Secondly, we have to build more proactive strategies and not just to be reactive on catastrophes or on emergent cases which happens. And thirdly, I believe we have to speak much more in one voice. We were taken in Washington, Moscow, Beijing only seriously. The member states understand that together they are strong, divided they are weak. Here one voice policy has to be achieved.
If Europe is to still remain relevant as a continent in the future, it really needs to stop looking in on itself and worrying about institutional structures. It needs to be thinking about opening up its markets, making sure that our single market is competitive. It needs to make sure that we have clout on a global stage because we matter as an economy, not closing itself off from the rest of the world. And that is what we need to do. It needs to stop focusing on political union and stop worrying about harmonisation and look out to the rest of the world.
Well, on paper the EU has had a common foreign and security policy since 2009, but more than once we've been very disappointed by the impact it has had on the global stage. We must be much more ambitious, and I would suggest it only makes sense that we start in our immediate neighbourhood, whether it's towards the south, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria, the broader Middle East, where the stakes are very high and where values like human rights are under enormous pressure. But also on the east, if we look at the people standing on squares in the very, very cold temperatures in the Ukraine, it is essential that the EU has a strong neighbourhood policy based on our interests, but also protecting the human rights of people of an increasingly young generation. That should be the focus of our common foreign and security policy first and foremost in the next term.
I think we have to prepare strategies for the future. If you look to Ukraine, to the Middle East, to North of Africa or other regions, it is not possible only to react a crisis is here, but also to have a preventive policy and preventive diplomacy, and that will be our major task for the coming years.